I'm with Dr. Theotis Robinson. Dr. Robinson was among the first group of African Americans to be admitted to undergraduate studies at the University of Tennessee. He also served on the Knoxville City Council as well as being an administrator at UT. Very impressive life and a very impressive journey. So thank you for joining me here today, Dr. Robinson.
Glad to do so.
There's a picture right there. It is the 1949 McMillan School first grade class. I believe it's Mrs. Sinclair's class.
Yes.
Which one are you in that picture?
That is my smiling 6-year-old face with a bunch of other 6-year-olds, many of whom have now passed on, but some of whom are still with us.
What was it like growing up as an African American in Knoxville in the 1950s?
First of all, I grew up not knowing that we were poor. My parents both worked, and it was my mom and my dad and an older sister and me, so there were 4 of us. I grew up over where the Knoxville Auditorium Coliseum is built. The street was called Acres Place, which no longer exists, and so my world was populated by other black kids and black families.
But once you step out of that, you see that there are differences between what black folks were allowed to do and what white folks were allowed to do. For instance, Chilhowie Park for years was segregated. Then it got to the point to where you could go, if you were black, you had one day a year to go to Chilhowie Park before it was integrated.
Originally, it was that one day of year, which was the 8th of August. I was too young for that. By the time I reached the age where I could go to the park, it was one day a week. There was one other venue like that. It was the Bijou Theater, which was a segregated theater, but it was the only white theater that allowed black patrons, but we had to go to a separate ticket booth, and the seating was upstairs.
One of the other differences was the restriction on higher education and
Yes.
the ability to go to certain schools. Can you kind of explain that?
UT, of course, was one of those places. My father worked at UT. He cooked for the training table where they fed their scholarship athletes. My dad had season tickets to attend UT football games. It was a segregated section. That's back when the stadium was a horseshoe. My dad would go in at halftime and check on the dinner, but I had that long connection with UT.
If we fast forward to 1960, the civil rights movement is starting to gain some steam. There was an ad in the newspaper that you saw that, I guess, changed your life.
Well, that along with some other things, it had also been started when I was really in the 5th grade. I had a teacher, Miss Drake, and there was a song that we all had to sing. It was "We Are Americans Too." And I remember one particular line said, "From Bunker Hill to the Rhine, we've been right there in line. We are Americans too." So at the elementary school level, we were being taught that this country was founded on certain principles that it had never lived up to, that we were still striving, as we are now, to form that more perfect union, but that awareness was developing. And so by the time the summer of 1960 rolled around, this came out in a July edition of the Knoxville News Sentinel, an appeal for human rights, and it listed a number of things that were wrong in Knoxville. One was, at the time, Knoxville had 4 hospitals. None of the 3 church-related hospitals would accept black patients, even on an emergency basis. So if you were involved in a serious car accident right in front of any of those 3, you had to be transported to UT, which was on a segregated basis. The Knoxville Police Department had had black cops for decades. And at that point in time, all of the black cops were college graduates, but none held rank above patrolmen. There were no black sergeants, lieutenants, captains, that kind of thing, and I noted that. And then, of course, that the fact that University of Tennessee's undergraduate school did not accept, quote, Negro undergraduates. I read that, and I just graduated from high school. I had a scholarship to attend Knoxville College. I wanted to major in political science, but Knoxville College did not offer a degree in political science. I sat down that night and wrote a letter of application to UT to apply for admission to the undergraduate school. I did not mention my race. I did not mention the high school that I had graduated from because the school system was segregated. And I took it downtown to what was then the main post office there on Main Street and dropped it in the mail. A week or so later, I got a response saying, "We're sorry, but the underschool does not accept Negroes as undergraduate students." Clearly, they did some investigation to know that I was black. Well, of course, I sent a letter in response requesting a meeting for my parents and me. We set up the meeting. They were very cordial, but said there was nothing that they could do. Wanted to know if we would like to meet with the president of the university, a man by the name of Andy Holt, that everybody in Tennessee knows that name. So we told him, yes, we certainly would like to meet with him. First time I'd ever been inside a wood paneled office. That was quite something to look at, wood paneling, okay. Met with Dr. Holt, who was also very cordial. He wanted to know why I wanted to come to UT. I laid it out for him. I laid out also that I had a right. Dr. Holt said that there was nothing that he could do about this. Only the Board of Trustees could deal with this issue, that we want him to take the matter to the board. And I then told him, but if the board doesn't act, I plan to sue the university to be admitted. The board met. They brought the state attorney general in to ask him if he thought he could win a lawsuit like this. He assured them that he couldn't. So they discussed it further and voted to admit me, which is why I consider myself the first African American admitted to the undergraduate school. I was the one who was on this point of the spear to bring about this change. January 4th of 1961, I enrolled. 2 other students also came on board, and we went forward from there.
What were your feelings? What were your fears of what could happen as you went through this process?
Well, when you have gone through lunch counter sit-ins, being called names, told to go back to Africa, all this kind of stuff, seeing people attacked, being a part of that environment, you get past that kind of fear. The only thing I was thinking was that this is something that I can do. I am well positioned to do this, and this is something I have to do. And so I was just totally committed. Fortunately, I didn't have the kinds of things happen around me and to me that some other students, for example, the University of Georgia desegregated 2 to 3 weeks after the University of Tennessee did. They had to call out the State Highway Patrol and the Georgia National Guard to put down the rebellion on campus, and a wholly different scenario. But those kinds of thoughts of what might happen just never entered my mind. It was something that I had to do, and I was committed to do it. I hear people talking about, oh, that was brave. I didn't think of it as that. It's just, this is something I've got to go do. That was the end of that. So whatever happened, was going to happen.
You were admitted to UT, and then later you would go back and you were an administrator, a long-time administrator, made a great contribution to the university. But what were your experience as a student?
As a student. Experience as a student was fine. I went home every evening. I didn't live on campus. I was married, and so I was there on campus in the daytime with very few evening interactions with the university. I developed a cadre of friends. At 1 quarter, I had gym class. It was my last class of the day. When the day was over, I'd go on in the gym and play pickup basketball with a bunch of guys, which had a lot of football players on there. One day, I checked out of basketball, and when it came time to go, I couldn't find my ball. So this one guy, I asked him, I think somebody tossed it up there in the balcony. Well, I went over to try the door to go up to get it, but the doors were locked. And he said, well, come here. And I stood there underneath the railing. He reached down and got me by my ankles and took me straight up, and I climbed over the rail, got the ball, dropped it down. He reached up and got me by my ankles and lowered me to the floor. That was a guy named Mike Lucci, who was an All-American linebacker for Tennessee, played for the Detroit Lions for years, and I realizing that he could pick me up like that, I took my game to the perimeter.
Probably a smart move.
If he can do that to me, yeah, I don't need to be in here battling him elbow to elbow for rebounds. But Mike was a good guy. I wasn't there to witness this story, but in one of his classes, this particular professor started going off one day on a racist rant. Mike was sitting in the class, and he got up and walked up to the professor, rolling up his sleeves, and said, "Would you repeat for me what you just said?" And the professor got the message and backed off, and Mike went back and took his seat. So my experience there as a student was positive. And those minor, what I considered minor incidents, didn't deter or dampen my spirits at all.
Tell us about your experience at the World's Fair.
Oh, that was great.
1982.
1982. The fair had a huge market, a 400-mile radius. Within that market area, you had millions of African Americans. You have to plan and you have to be intentional in your planning to make sure that you reach out to this community by doing several things. I wrote the policy, participation by the African American community in every aspect. The architectural drawings, we brought in a black-owned architectural firm, and then we brought in other contractors to do things that we had to have. We agreed that we were going to have black suppliers for souvenir items, things like t-shirts and World's Fair flags and this kind of stuff. We created job opportunities. We made sure that entertainment was broad. I never will forget the advertising agency brought in a couple of 30-second TV commercials that they planned to run. And both of those featured white families with kids. And I said, that's fine and good, but where are the black families? Oh, they hadn't thought about that. It is necessary to have that kind of presence there to point out that you missed the mark here. So we came back with enhanced marketing to reach out to this market.
You've got to be at the 1982 World's Fair in Knoxville, Tennessee.
And we attracted a lot of black folk to the fair to make sure that it's inclusive.
Dr. Robinson, this has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much. I admire you. You're a very brave person. I just appreciate that so much. And just thank you for your time. And thank you for all your contributions to our community.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.